Laura, welcome to the show. I'm really pleased to have you. Um, so let me start by saying cyber sort of security usually has a connotations around hacking and sort of major money operations and that sort of stuff, but that's not the case, is it?
No, definitely not. I think people forget that this stuff has real impact on people's lives. You know, I think we've all kind of come across it at some point, whether it's a phishing email or money being taken from us. But yeah, I guess it's something we really have to think about when it comes to how our data is used, and particularly where we're putting that kind of data. Um, and yeah, and data of a more intimate nature for sure.
And so tell us what sort of branch of cyber security that you've been studying in as part of your PhD.
Well, I guess as part of my PhD, well, yeah. So I guess from when I started, I came into cybersecurity from like geography, political geography, feminist geography. So it's quite new to me, and we kind of covered lots of technical stuff, but so things like network security and that kind of stuff, and then the management side of it. So thinking about if you're in an organization, what kind of things do those groups need to think about when it comes to cybersecurity? Um, Things like protecting customer data or company data. But as a part of my PhD, I became really interested in this thing that all my friends were talking about, which is period tracking apps. I had quite a few friends who had started using them for various reasons, and I noticed that kind of something that we were learning about, or I saw in lectures or in cybersecurity literature. So me and a few others in a space are trying to move towards this idea of feminist cybersecurity. So thinking about things like, I guess, kind of challenging cybersecurity and some of its assumptions, which is the kind of stuff I learned in geography. So thinking about where there might be power imbalances in what's kind of coming across. So for example, a kind of classic cybersecurity uh, thing is, or kind of, yeah, like a real world example that they use is things like, okay, well, a cyber security threat that might come to you as an organization is a kind of disgruntled employee who's been let go, but might still have like access to company login details, and therefore, be kind of malicious um, to that company. But I kind of want to flip that and think about, okay, but how could a kind of company that's got someone's data be malicious or kind of cause threat to an individual, and how might that be different depending on who you are? So yeah, so that's kind of where I am now, and within period tracking apps, all that kind of focus on kind of intimate tech. I'm trying to also make cybersecurity think about stuff that it's been ignoring. So like, yeah, so like period. There's loads of kind of period devices now, or different apps that do different things. But also there's a whole kind of branch of FemTech, which is like continuously emerging, and is kind of estimated to reach huge numbers of revenue in the next few years. So yeah, so I'm trying to make that more of a focus for the kind of technical side of cybersecurity too.
And it's very interesting that sort of you're looking at period tracking apps, which many people might not know are pretty much ubiquitous on female phones.
Yeah, yeah. It's really rare to find someone that doesn't use them.
And so this is really interesting because this idea that this period tracking app is collecting your information and could potentially be using your information in ways you might not want your information to be used. So how are they doing this? What kind of information are they taking, and are we conscious of the information that is being given to them?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I think they're they're really interesting because of the information they collect, and that's kind of what makes them unique as well. So, um, for example, out there, the NHS has a set that it kind of suggests that people use, but in that case, they don't collect actually, sorry, I'm going to re-say that again. I think they're really interesting because of the combination of information they collect. So that can be anything to do with kind of standard personal information, whether that's your date of birth. Might ask for things like relationship status or location as well. And then it has kind of the health tracking side. So that could be sleep patterns and that kind of stuff. And then you've got kind of stuff around your menstrual cycle, your fertility, and what you plan to do with that. And then finally, you have sex data as well. So aspects of your sexual activity are captured in that app in quite a lot of detail, depending on the app you're using. Okay. So there's no app really that collects all of those things together. The kind of closest comparison is health apps, but they don't ask you why you're using the app, or like whether you're planning this major life event change, like having a baby or going through menopause. And they don't collect things like this kind of private aspect of your sex life. But in terms of how and what they kind of do with that and whether that's clear, I would say it's not clear. Or certainly from what we've looked at so far, we found that a lot of the time, the key way that kind of these apps are trying to communicate with their users about what's happening with their data is through privacy policies. And in the apps that we've looked at, none of those privacy policies are very good at communicating anything. Whether that's like because they're maybe like 5 lines long and don't have any detail at all, and end up being like really vague and not really telling you anything, or it can be that they're like, I don't know, pages and pages of like impenetrable language and really unclear statements about what may or may not be happening.
So say for example a female now is using this app and she's been asked all this information. How much is it the responsibility of sort of the user to say, well, actually I don't need to give this information because it's not relevant to my cycle?
Yeah, I think it's really hard to know what to give and what not to. I think so many of them suggest that by giving away more information, you'll be getting something extra from the app. From where we've seen, when we've done our research, we found that the apps can have subtle ways in some cases of asking you for more detail than you want to give. Or, it might not seem like you're entering in data, but actually you are. So an example of that would be quite a few of the apps have community spaces where you can answer polls or do quizzes and things like that. But a lot of the time those are posted by employees of the company. Okay. And by doing that, you're kind of giving away information without realizing it. And again, those can be things that you just never expected an app to know. So like, have you got a history of depression? Like asking you to explain like whether your period looks like a crime scene, or like all those kind of things that end up just slowly giving away more data. And where that becomes more interesting is if you go into the depths of the privacy policy. Sometimes they say that information isn't something that can be deleted or you can remove, or you can alter even. So within, I think this still holds anyway, within GDPR kind of areas where GDPR what's the word?
Applies?
Yes, applies. Then you have the right for that data to be removed. But they kind of say that because that's publicly available, that isn't your data anymore. Okay. It's interesting. Like, yeah, I think there's definitely ways sometimes for them to ask you to give them more. But I think it's really hard because all of the information about what's happening with your data is kind of hidden within these privacy policies. And even if, like I said, even if they're simple, there's stuff hidden in them. I think it's really hard as a user to work out whether to use them or not and what to give over.
Absolutely. I think also the trouble with sort of throwing the responsibility on the user is the fact that the user is simply going by the design of the app, and if the design of the app is such that it sort of propels you to like give away more information, then you're human, you're subject to all these biases, and you might just give away more information. But the thing that's really interesting to me is, I want to know, or can you sort of elaborate and share, how do these sort of apps, how can they potentially profit off this information?
Yeah, interesting question. I think there are a lot of different ways, and some of those we don't really understand yet. And I think like we'll start to see it come out more in future, because in a lot of senses, from what we found, certainly, they don't necessarily give information away about your periods, or that kind of stuff. But so for example, like when you enter something in, it's not immediately necessarily telling like their app servers or the third parties that they use, what has happened, like that you've just started your period, but they can be. I guess that could sound unclear, but I mean that a lot of information can be kind of hidden in the technical messages that those apps send to the servers. So we found, and this is what kind of other research has found as well, that app events can, which is basically this kind of thing within the app that tells you how you as a user, tells the developers how you as a user are kind of navigating through it. If that's not very well implemented, then that can say like, okay, well, you've clicked this button, which means that your period has started, and then can communicate that to others. So where that's been picked up in the media is with Facebook and their like a piece of software that was in several period tracking apps that was from Facebook was doing that. So Facebook was then getting this kind of quite detailed information.
So Facebook would know straight away that a female started her period.
Yeah, and it's interesting whether or not that was kind of, basically Facebook doesn't like that happening. Or so it says, like there's like a whole thing that they do asking people to report where like their stuff has been badly implemented, but at the same time that is it doesn't change the fact that that's where it was going. So where that data is going to app servers and they're doing something with it, that's where there could be an issue. So it's really hard to know from the outside whether that's happening or not. We found certainly in some cases that those app events were going to the developers' servers.
So is it the developer's responsibility then to look? Is it the developer's responsibility to communicate it to the user that as soon as you click on this is going to Facebook?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely, especially because there's been other researchers that have said, kind of particularly when you're looking at like sex tech, which is a really big industry now, where you've got like sex toys collecting information about like biofeedback and those kind of things. And in the past, that has been collected, or because of like it's been designed badly, there's been stuff collected by accident. There's a group that have just said like, if we just didn't collect the stuff at all, then there would be no risk. There's no risk of someone taking it in like a cyber attack, and there's no risk of someone selling it on without your permission, or without you really being clear about what's happening with it. Because I think people give away consent because they don't know what they're consenting to.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think it's the same with this. Like people don't really know what's going on with their data or know which third parties are getting it. So they consent because the app provides a service that they can't do without. For so many people, it can be a way of diagnosing diseases like endometriosis, which I think the average diagnosis for that is like 8 years. And it takes like constant doctor's trips to like get a proper diagnosis. And just like ease of knowing when your period is really helpful. So I think it's unrealistic for the user to have to make these decisions, given that they're already getting so much back. And a lot of cases, people don't care because it's kind of like a risk that you can't associate, like a risk that has no downsides as far as you can see. You don't know how that information is then feeding advertisement, feeding kind of a bigger picture about you. because I guess that's one of the things that data brokers do, is they find lots of ways to build a bigger picture about you. So they know that, for example, they know when your period is, so they know how to target advertisements to you and stuff like that. So I
So
think that's where it could be.
so about the targeting the advertising, I know you shared with me some research, and in the research it sort of talks about the different sort of stages of the cycle and how they use that to advertise different things. So could you sort of share a bit more about that?
Yeah, I had a look at this paper. I'm not sure about like how well it's done, but because they did it on like a couple of, I think only like a couple of women, but it's definitely interesting thought that basically you would be, the idea that you could be more susceptible to certain you could be more susceptible to certain kinds of products depending on where you are in your cycle. So you're more likely, from their research, you're more like makeup and things like that make you look appealing when ovulating, rather than post ovulation, where you could be pregnant, or you might try and buy like homeware to nest.
Okay.
So I'm not sure how much kind of backing that has, like, but the fact that I guess it doesn't really matter, because that might be something that we see happening anyway. Because I think what's interesting about these apps, in another sense, is that some of them now have huge like quantities of data about how people are in their cycle, because you get kind of mood information as a part of that as well. So Glow, for example, is one of the kind of big like giants in this area, and they say that they have one of the biggest data sets on women's bodies like in the world, because it's kind of a chronically under researched thing anyway. And I guess what's interesting about that is you're kind of leaving these big data sets in the hands of corporate power without kind of any real regulation, or I guess without even the user having any say about what's going on with that. And it's just like, can we trust them to do good things with it or not? For example, there's been a couple of apps that have got some quite shady like financial backing, and how much of those kind of things going to impact what happens with that data after.
So all this sort of is really troubling for like somebody who didn't know there was a problem here. I mean, to me, as somebody that has never had to deal with a period in my life, it just sounds like a really convenient tool that women can use and make the most of. But then now we're sort of finding all these avenues of potential misconduct, and there's no accountability and stuff like that. So what do you think would be the future, or what would be a positive future for the FemTech industry?
I think there's how to ask this. I think in a couple of cases we're starting to see some really cool tech that's coming out that doesn't have those kind of ethical challenges attached to it. And I would say that there's kind of another set of femtech companies that are trying to do things right, that are trying to do right by their users. And what's interesting about femtech is that a lot of their founders are people that had an issue that they faced themselves and then wanted to make a solution for it. I don't know if you see so much in other industries. And I think where there's those kind of motives behind it, rather than maybe profit, there's some interesting stuff coming out. But yeah, and I think it would be really cool if you could have more transparency on the whole in how in how tech is designed and how users are told about that as well. Like an active consent process that doesn't just ask you once, but ask you more than once, and consent means more than just agreeing yes and you don't know any of the real risk or not.
So let me sort of interject there. Obviously, given that sort of Silicon Valley is taken over FemTech and female bodies now, by the sounds of things. One would obviously say, okay, well, these guys are pumping huge amounts of money into these apps to the development and the hiring and stuff like that. They're gonna have to make their money somewhere. So would the safe solution be an app that you pay money for, like $2, $3 a month, and that doesn't share any data anywhere? Or would it or would it be just the current state? Because are people willing to pay money to sort of track their periods?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think where we've seen the kind of leaders in that space in terms of trying to be really privacy conscious and think about, like, you know, where money is coming from within the app. Where money is coming into the company. Clue have been really good at doing both of those things. So they've now moved to a subscription model, but none of their kind of revenue has ever come from advertising.
Okay.
So, and I guess it's kind of like, I think they call it the freemium model, like Spotify or anything like that, where some users pay and some don't, but each get the kind of service, but the paid users get maybe more more content, more insights, that kind of stuff. And I think that does work well. And Clue have been really good at kind of breaking things down in a much more accessible way. So they have this commitment to never sharing anything, but also they have like a post on their blog that says what they do with every single data point they collect and how they protect it, how that they store it, that kind of stuff, which is really cool. And then the other side of it is, I guess, developing technology through a different way. So don't do it so this, like the Silicon Valley way, where you're kind of raising funds and then getting the idea out there and then looking always for investment, but looking for I guess maybe this needs to be government sponsored or something, or where you've got pots of money that you can put into providing a service through an app or through something else, and then letting that app stand alone because of this pot of money that you've got from this source. I guess, like, again, funding is a big issue here, but there's a app called Drip, which I'm a really big fan of, and they have developed this app. It's completely open source and transparent, and they and it's developed by this feminist collective of developers, and for them to start their app, they did use the pot of money from oh gosh, I can't remember the details of this now, but it was like they're based in Berlin, so it was like a German pot of money for this kind of thing, for like transparent kind of socially motivated products or services, I should say, because products makes it sound different. But then the problem with that is that, like, until groups are happy to continuously give these pots of money to provide this service, like, you're not really going to have something that can exist like that, because apps need constant maintenance, they need updating. So I think it's a bit of a difficult one to answer. Like, I think it's a difficult one because it's hard to provide this thing without there ever being any money involved. But it kind of raises the question whether, like, healthcare and health tech should ever be kind of commodified.
So let me ask you about your own personal journey. How sort of did you find yourself studying these apps? Like, what was your journey to get in here?
Yeah, it's a bit like all over the place. It kind of so it started with, like, I guess, an interest in power relations. I guess that's probably the thing that comes across a lot of my journey. I did a master's in which I really looked at this thing called feminist geography, which is all about investigating power relations, but from, like, the most benign level. It wasn't so interested in, like, nation states or governments, but thinking about, like, how does power impact people's lives on a day-to-day basis, and
Mm-hmm.
how is that kind of interrelated to the bigger things that are happening in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I started with that, and that was something I really focused on my master's and different pieces of work. And then I really wanted to do a PhD that I guess explored these kind of things a bit more, but at the time I was going in a kind of completely different direction with what I wanted to do with that. And so I applied to the CDT with this original idea, and kind of, yeah, don't know how to say that. Like, I don't know if it's worth explaining the idea, or if it's just a bit random.
No, go ahead. No.
Okay, so like I was saying, I was interested in the ways that things that happen in the world impact people on a daily basis, and in like an everyday kind of space. And in this case, I wanted to look at how my mum is Sikh, and my mum's family is Sikh, and look at how Sikhs were getting enrolled in kind of the language of the war on terror and the events of the war on terror through things like Prevent, and also like at the time, this was like 2015, 2016, there had been a few attacks on Gurdwaras, and there was a Sikh dentist that got stabbed in when he was doing his shopping, and all that kind of stuff. So this kind of really enraged me, for one. And then I was just interested in the ways that they kind of became a part of the conversation, even when
they know.
Yeah. So yeah, so I was interested in that, and then thinking about how people were experiencing that on a daily basis, and how they were resisting it and creating different narratives to combat this kind of let's stick everyone in the same group kind of thing. So then I was looking at how that was done online, and then that's what brought me to the CDT in terms of applying for PhDs to study this further. And then that's when I also got really interested in the idea of gender and technology. So I did a course on the CDT which looked at gender and sexuality at its kind of historical roots. And in that we did a session about contraceptives. And I saw a lot of parallels with what we learned in that, in kind of reflected with conversations I was having with friends about using apps as a form of contraception, because Natural Cycles, which is kind of quite a popular app. If you're a woman of a certain age, you'll definitely have had like a Natural Cycles ad pop up on Facebook. So I was interested in bringing those things together. I was thinking, like, well, if it's technology, then you can't really escape that cybersecurity has to be part of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, then that's kind of how my PhD formed, or like my PhD. That's the kind of my journey, I guess.
But I mean, it does make sense, because sort of the underpinning element of it is the fact that it's sort of how the imbalance of power, and where does that come from, and how we're enabling that. So I completely see it. It's not like an illogical sort of turn of events. It makes complete sense.
Yeah, and I guess if you're interested in something as well, it always like ends up being something that follows you around. So.
But that's really interesting. I mean, that's really interesting in that you came from sort of the background of sort of looking at these issues relating to Prevent and what have you, and you've ended up here. So you've been at the CDT for how long now?
September 2017.
Oh, so you've been there a couple of years now, 3 years now. Yeah. Oh, so that's really good. And what's your experience of the CDT been like so far?
Yeah, it's been good. We've made some really good friends. Colleagues, like good people that have helped along the journey, and been kind of I don't know. I think it's been really helpful to have other people in the same situation, and it doesn't really matter that research is different, but like having the support, particularly of two people in my year, has been like I don't know, dreamy, because it's just so nice to have, like I said, someone in a similar position, to kind of not compare, to have someone in a similar position to, well, just help you along the way. So.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose there's an element of companionship in having to go through the certain experience together. But within the sort of research aspect of it so far, and any obstacles you faced, how has that support been?
Well, I don't think it's how to answer this. I think it's interesting because I still exist kind of in a geography space too, but my research is trying to kind of make the two talk to each other. But I think if I hadn't had the kind of technical base that the CDT provided at the beginning, it would look, I don't know, it's given me a kind of like legitimacy in a way, and taught me skills I wouldn't have had otherwise. And the first year of having that space to work out what you want to be doing for the next 3-4 years, and really shape your research around things you learn, but also your background. And I don't know of many PhD programs where you get space to kind of form ideas, get training. In that first year, I also went to conferences for the first time. Just like it provided me so many opportunities to kind of, that I think have really shaped the rest of my journey. Like learning, how to give a good conference presentation, or at least I think I'm better at it than that first one.
But I mean, the fact that there is this focus on these soft skills and sort of looking at, like, for somebody like yourself who's come from geography, politics kind of background, how much of your sort of early intimidation, I'm guessing, from sort of cyber technology was eased in that first year of you sort of getting into the program?
Oh, okay. Don't know how honestly to answer that. I think it was eased by the fact that we were never expected to be experts on something.
Yeah.
It was always, I think that's an important thing to have kind of learned in that first week, is that you're not expected to reel off, loads of stuff, and clearly I can't remember that much from the specifics of that the courses I did, but you're not supposed to know anything specific, and you're not going to get necessarily tested on it to that degree, but it's about widening your skill set, and being aware of how different, in my case, different subjects approach problems, and like learning where the assumptions lie, and how they do stuff. Because like me and my in cybersecurity are publishing a piece of work at the moment in a security and privacy conference, and like that very process and trying to learn how a different subject does all of that stuff has been interesting, and the first year really helped kind of learn that. But also I'm never expected to be someone different to who I am, which is interdisciplinary, an interdisciplinary person.
And that makes a lot of sense, and fundamentally that there is this big shift towards interdisciplinary research where you are equally as sort of recognized as anybody else in that department, because your background has equal weighting, and this is the beautiful thing about sort of interdisciplinary research, is that you're not so focused on just one narrow field, where you can share your ways of thinking with them and come up with, for example, ideas about why FemTech needs to be challenged.
Yeah, definitely. I think as soon as you open yourself up to different conversations and kind of take off those horses, like exactly, take off your blinders and open up yourself to different subjects, and you'll definitely find exciting things. And I think nothing in the world has just been like, could just be confined to one discipline or like
Oh, that's
one
right.
set of people to like answer. So yeah, I think it's definitely a cool thing.
So,
Interdisciplinary.
so where next for you? What's your plans after the PhD?
Yeah, good question. I don't really know. I would like to go into academia, I think, or I'd love to continue researching. Um, I don't know if that's possible or not. I would love it to be. Um, but I think I don't know, see what's out there when I get there.
What would you consider sort of getting into the femtech industry?
I think I am thinking about it more at the moment because I think there's definitely some cool things going on there. And I see so much passion and enthusiasm from some of the founders behind some of the things that are coming out there. So I think if it's done right, it can be great. But I also don't know because if I don't know, yeah, the whole profit thing still puts me off
Yeah,
slightly.
yeah, yeah. No, I completely understand that. I completely understand. So what advice would you get into? What would you give to somebody who's like yourself was looking for a PhD and had a particular idea, and then sort of had to make a little bit of a pivot from that idea? What advice would you give it around that whole process?
I think two things. You don't need to be clever to do a PhD, you just need to be enthusiastic. That's a great piece of advice my dad gave me when I was like, I really want to do a PhD, but I don't think I'm clever enough. Um, and think about how much you love that thing, that
Mm-hmm.
idea, and whether you can see yourself spending 4 or 5 years, maybe longer,
Mm-hmm.
on it. Does it interest you that much? Is there enough there? Does it just kind of suggest endless possibilities to you, or do you kind of get kind of to the end of it quite quickly? Because I think you have to really like something to want to spend this much time on it. So
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. That's fantastic advice. I definitely second that myself. Well, Laura, it's been fantastic speaking to you. I think your work is really important, and I hope to catch up with you sometime soon.
cool. Thank you very much.
Cheers.